Welcome everybody to the Striped Sox Podcast. I am your host, Jonathan Melma, and this week there is no Justin because
Aww.
because he is busy with games and his sister is getting married. So congrats to
Woo!
her. Yeah, congrats to her. So instead we have a guest host. This is Evan Katz. He is one of
Good
my friends here at
afternoon.
Michigan State. And you want to give yourself a little introduction, Evan?
Yeah, so hi Jonathan, thank you for having me on here. I'm an avid baseball watcher. I eat, sleep, and drink baseball. Favorite team, gotta be the Tigers, no matter what you do around here. I see that old English T on your hat and behind you there, but gotta represent even in the trying times. But oh yeah.
Mhm. Yeah, we'll talk a little bit more about the trying times later on in the episode, but yeah, we will have a lot to say about that. But first, we want to this is not going to be, a great thing to start the episode off with, but Willie Mays passed away this past week, so that is really sad for the baseball world. I know it's a shock to a lot of us.
Yeah, and Jonathan, so actually I was listening to the Dodgers radio broadcast via the Waves of X, what we call it now. And it was Dave Fleming was on the call for that, and that was
Mhm,
really interesting. He was trying to bring it in a way that was not interrupting the game flow where he was still
mhm.
calling it, but it took it. He was like, "Ladies and gentlemen, I have your attention, please. I have something to share." And then I don't know if he couldn't get it in, or if he was trying to follow the action, or if he was too emotional. One of the three things that were happening. Um, he would mention it, and he'd like pre in a bat, and then be like, "Well, ladies and gentlemen, the Giants have just like 3 minutes later, he finally said the
Yeah.
Giants have finally announced that Willie Mays has passed away peacefully this afternoon. Our thoughts and but like you could tell he was tearing up
Hmm.
listening to it, and it was kind of cool. I went to Comerica Park this past weekend for the Tigers White Sox game, which we'll talk more about later. But at the beginning of it, they honored Willie Mays, and that
Oh,
was
that's
really
really
cool.
cool.
The team stepped out of their dugout. They had the thing on the scoreboard that said Willie Mays from year to year. Um, and the moment of silence, but that was a really
Mhm.
cool rendition.
That is really cool. And I was unaware of both those actually. So that's really cool that that happened. And I know for me, I just gotten off work and I saw something, don't know if it's Jeff Passan or Bob Nightingale tweet out like Rip Willie Mays. And at first I was like, what? That's
Yeah,
weird. I was like,
yeah,
weren't we just talking about Willie Mays earlier today and the game coming up this week to honor him?
yeah.
I was like, no, this must be like a typo or something. And then like a few minutes later, it just started getting bombarded with rest in peace, Willie Mays. I was like,
Yeah.
oh wow, he
Wow.
he actually passed away. Um,
Not 93 too.
yeah,
And it just happened to be a couple days before the game, the Giants Cardinals game at
yep.
Rickfield on June 20th, or I think it was a day before actually, was it not?
He passed away, yeah, the day before.
Yeah. Um,
It was either a
but
day, no, 2 days before, because they played a minor league game there the day before, and it
but
was the day prior to the minor league game. Hey guys, it's editor Jonathan here. When I'm editing this, I realized that we said Ricksfield.
Um, like every time we talk about Rickwood Field, so I just wanted to pop in here and clarify: is Rickwood Field? I apologize for both of us calling it Rickfield, but it is in fact Rickwood Field. It is in fact not.
But
yeah, he,
still,
he 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 has a ton of history. He's in a club of his own, Jonathan. He had 50 homers and 20 triples in one
oh,
year.
I did not know about that club.
He is one of just 30 players all time to hit at least 50 homers in a single season, and is only of 86 players to rack up at least 20 triples in a season. So they're separate stats. But making it more incredible in the fact Mays reached those in 2 years apart, crushing an MLB leading 51 homers in 1955 before pacing all players with 20 triples in the year 57.
So really showing off the power and the speed in back-to-back seasons then.
Yeah,
That's
that
interesting.
that was just a few of his accolades.
Yep.
He was he was a king for we know that he was a king for stolen bases as well. Had he or even extra bases. He had 70 extra base hits in 13 straight seasons from 1954 to 1966. No other player has 13 such seasons consecutive or otherwise in Major League Baseball
Wow.
history.
Wow. Like, you know, Willie Mays is one of the legendary players,
Yeah.
and like that's just a name that, is up there with Hank Aaron, Babe Ruth, Ty Cobb, like all those guys. But to really just hear these stats, some of these are just crazy.
You want to guess how many times he made the All-Star game here, Jonathan?
Oh, how many years did he play? It was 20 something, right?
Uh-huh.
Okay.
I don't know the exact years on that, but
Okay. I'm gonna guess
he has the most in Major League Baseball history as well.
the most All-Star appearances.
Uh-huh.
My original thought is 17, but I
You're
feel like that's a
close. You're very
little bit
close.
low then, if it's the
No,
most.
it's actually 18.
Oh, okay.
Most in Major League Baseball history. And that was he had a 14 straight All-Star game appearances from 1957 to 65,
Which
including
is
both games in
insane.
each season, in both games in each season from 1952 and 62, because I guess there were two
Oh yeah, because
All-Star
they
games.
did two
Yeah,
All-Star games at that
yeah.
time, yeah. Which is a really weird quirk. Because they
You
did one, I believe, mid-season and at the end of the season too.
we talked about his bat and his fielding a little bit there, but his Golden Glove, Jonathan, was also a thing. He had 12 Golden Glove awards, the most by any center fielder, and is also responsible for the well-known catch over the
Catch.
shoulder
Yep.
in Game 1 of 1954 in the World Series.
Yep. And this year was the 30 or the 70th anniversary of that, if I'm not
Correct.
mistaken.
Yeah.
And the Ricks Field game was in memory of that partially, which then turned into memory of him as well and the Negro Leagues as a whole. So yeah, that's one of the most iconic plays in baseball. Um, that Babe Ruth calling his shot.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, it
I know they
is
even
crazy.
released like a documentary. I think it was last year on HBO. I don't know if you ever got a chance to watch that, but it
No.
was about like how he shaped the game, how he changed the game, and how he became even off the field. It was a really interesting documentary. I'm not a advertiser here, but I highly recommend you take a look at that
Now I
and go.
have to check that out.
Yeah.
So that'll be on my watch list now. So
But you mentioned that game at Brickfield Field. Did you or Rickfield? What is it? Brickfield? I think it's
Rickfield,
Rickfield. Okay.
Rickfield.
So you mentioned that. Did you watch that at all?
Um, I watched a very small portion of it. It just didn't line up with my
Mm.
schedule.
So
I was quite
uh,
disappointed that I didn't, but
yeah,
that's how
you missed out on an Emmy
it
winning
goes about.
Fox broadcast. It was phenomenal actually.
Yep.
Pregame to postgame. I'm sure you've seen it by now. I'll read the comments for you in a minute if you really want me to. The Reggie Jackson comments pregame
Yep,
talking
I
about
heard all about
his
that.
past for your audience here. If you want me to read that, I sure can. I have it up.
Yeah, go ahead.
Um
Yeah, while you're pulling that up, I did see that they went to the 4-3 format
yeah.
and did all of the old style stuff.
That's what I thought was really neat too about the
That was
broadcast.
so
You,
cool. In
you
black and
have
white and everything.
so his comments were it says in quote, coming back here is not easy, Jackson told Rodriguez. The racism when I played here, the difficulty of going through different places where we traveled. Fortunately, I had a manager and players on the team that helped me get through it. But I wouldn't wish it on anybody. He continued, I walked into restaurants and they would point at me and say the N-word and you can't
Mhm.
eat here. I would go he in quotes, he said, I would go to a hotel and they would also say the N word and you can't stay here. They went to Charlie Finney's county club for a welcome home dinner, and they pointed out that he can't come here. Finally marched the whole time out. Finally, they let me in, and he said, "We're gonna go to a diner and eat hamburgers. We're all where we wanted." Fortunately, he said, I had a manager in Johnny McNamara that even if I couldn't eat in the place, nobody would eat, and we'd get food to travel. If I couldn't stay in a hotel, they'd drive to the next hotel and find a place where I could. So talk about that was really impressive to me that Fox One let that carry
Hmm.
on throughout the broadcast because and I appreciate that they did, to be honest.
Me too.
They obviously had a few bleeping points in that conversation because there are
Yeah,
certain things that the FCC won't allow.
right.
But there's that way talking about the history of the game is really important for the young audience that happened. I saw an article today that he was talking about reflecting about those comments, and he didn't regret it at all. It was like reflection of
Mhm.
really solid area of people need to know what this
Oh yeah.
environment was like back then. And you everyone thinks about the Jackie Robinson
Hmm.
introduction when he was introduced with the Brooklyn Dodgers. Everyone was hating him as well. This was kind of what Jackson just kind of described. But that broadcast I thought was phenomenal. They actually built their cameras and their broadcast booth on the roof of the stadium because they didn't
Really?
have those situated. So they had to
Oh, that
build
makes
like
sense.
little decks for their cameras to
Hmm.
stand. And they had to build like a little um canopy. No, not a canopy, like a little hooded temporary building or tent
Yeah,
area for their broadcast to be. And it was really cool because obviously the production you can do production from the main studio or whatever they could do.
right.
But doing those features and having those stats, it wasn't just like oh, we're gonna go black screen and we'll be back with a 4-3 1950s. You could tell the amount of preparation that they
Hmm.
had in that broadcast and the people MLB brought out too for that broadcast when they had people come out. I can't remember who exactly came out, but the people they did have come out for the ceremony of honoring Willie Mays or honoring just that entire league. I know you talked about it on one of your last podcasts about how the leagues were really combined and how MLB is finally honoring their stats.
Yeah,
Um, but
and this is a nice way of kind of reflecting on that past, and giving the history and showing everyone what it was like.
yeah,
So I
absolutely.
think really those go hand in hand, the stats and this game all together, and the comments made by Reggie Jackson.
You
A
want to
lot of
know?
people, just believe that once Jackie Robinson broke the color barrier, like, oh, everything was good, everyone was fine with it.
Yeah,
No, that was the first domino to fall, and there was a lot more to go before we get to today.
you want to know a few more stats here, Jonathan?
You know I do because I love stats,
Yeah,
as
I
you
know you
clearly
do.
do
That's
also.
why I have all these stats here. So he was one of 33 members of the 3,000 hit club, but he is the only player in Major League Baseball history with at least 3,000 hits, a 300 average, 300 home runs, and 300 stolen bases. Of course, exceeded some of those plateaus easily, finishing with 3,283 hits, 660 homers, and 338 steals.
And you're talking about Mace here still, right?
Correct. Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, just a phenomenal player, and yeah, I'm definitely going to have to go back and watch the game. Um, but yeah, the clips that I saw,
It's
um,
definitely if you
were
have a Major League Baseball TV,
I do.
you can go back, I think, in the archives because it was a national broadcast game. It might not have it, so it might be on Fox Sports.
I believe
Um,
you're able to watch any of them in the last 2 years from
are
any
you?
broadcast on MLB TV. Yeah.
I know in COVID, that was during the times where you could watch anything from even
Hmm.
like 2006. It was amazing. Um,
Yeah. Yeah, because there's that archive, and then I think it's the 2019 season now doesn't exist because everything
mm,
prior to that's on YouTube
yeah,
now, but then
yeah,
it's only like the last 3 or 4 seasons. Maybe it's
yeah.
2020 and 2019 at this point because it's like the last 3 or 4 seasons are on MLB TV, but then they clear them out. So there's like
You
this gray area where you cannot watch any of these games.
well, that's another topic
It
for
is another
another
topic.
day. Um, but back to Willie Mays here for just a second. He was one of 4 players to record at least 20 doubles, triples, home runs, and stolen bases in the same season. The other people that I can pronounce, Curtis Granderson in 2007 and
Was that
Jimmy
with the
Ohms in
Tigers still?
2007. Uh, I want to say
Think
yes.
so. I think that was right before we traded him.
It would be right before he traded him.
Yeah.
One more stat I'll leave you here with is ranking third among position players with 156.2 BWAR. If you want to explain what BWAR is for people.
So that's baseball reference war. So it's going to be similar to Fangraphs war, which is what we typically use just because a lot of people I feel like use Fangraphs war. So do you happen to have his Fangraphs war up or only B
No,
war?
I am actually on MLB.com/news/Willie
Oh, fair
Mays
enough.
stats.
Wait, they use baseball reference war, not Fangraphs. Interesting.
I guess so.
I did not know that actually. But yeah, it's very slight tweaks. It's more pronounced on pitchers because
Mm.
they use FIP instead of ERA
He
for
was only
pitchers
trailing Babe Ruth in BW in that season
in the
with
B war.
yeah at
Yeah.
162.8 and Barry Bonds with 162.1.
And both those guys are destined to be up there. But the big difference in B war and F war for offensive players is going to be the defensive metrics that they use. But it should be within, a handful of war. And at that point, I don't think 4 war is going to do that much when you're in third place all time.
You
Really.
we mentioned Willie Mays was a high All-Star player. I'd have to check on the 18 because I don't know if MLB.com had their own number correctly because I'm seeing something here that says 24. So I'm gonna double check.
Maybe that's the counting both All-Star games.
Yeah, maybe that's
So it
counting
might
both
be or it might be 18 seasons, but 24 games. That's
24
kind of my
games.
guess.
Yeah. But you said we mentioned that a little bit here, Jonathan.
Yeah.
So let's talk a little bit about the All-Star game ballots that have just come out a little bit.
Yeah.
The first ballot came out last week,
Hmm.
and there's a lot of surprising things on it here. And a lot of those are bring up the topic about fan voting. Okay. This happens in all leagues, and I get it, it's a popularity contest. You want to
It
see
definitely
who,
is.
who who is a part of it. Like there's some years I question why LeBron James is in the All-Star game, but it's because he's
It's
LeBron
LeBron.
James. Exactly. Um, but you look at some of these names. I don't know if you have a link pulled up on it, but I have it here. The first ballot was in. Vlad got first is leading first base position in the American League.
Which I don't
Is
think he's the best first baseman in the American League.
exactly.
Like he's
Um,
solid, but you're definitely going off a name there.
you have
Um,
Jose Altuve leading American League in second.
that's a little bit more justifiable, but that's a lot more names still.
Yeah, you have Jose Ramirez, which just makes a little more sense at third base
Yep,
for the Guardians.
that makes a lot of
That
sense.
one I'll agree with. Um, for shortstop, you have Gunnar Henderson with the Orioles. That one also.
That one's a slam dunk.
Outfield, listen to this one. The top three you have Aaron Judge,
Yep.
Soto, and Tucker. Kyle Tucker.
Okay, I can yeah. I can understand the Aaron Judge. Soto's been decent.
Yeah.
And Kyle Tucker's been decent. Off the top of
Sn-
my head, I can't necessarily, name
n-
off
n-
better
n-
guys,
National League,
but
if we go through them on the real quick here, the first base side for National League, Bryce Harper. Okay, that one a
okay,
little
that
bit.
makes
That one makes
sense.
sense. I'm sure National League is gonna have a bunch of Phillies. Second base is gonna be Luis Ariz or Luis Ariz at second
Right.
base.
That makes
Um,
sense.
third, Alec Boehm. That one makes sense.
Yep.
Um,
Shortstop of
shortstop Mookie
Mookie,
Betts. Yep.
who
Outfield
won't
is
get to play in the All-Star game
exactly.
most likely, but
So the
still.
next one up there is Trey Turner, which also
Yep.
makes sense.
Yep, it
Um,
does, especially after him turning it around since the start of last year.
Outfield is Profar, Yelich, Tatis Jr., um catcher Contreras, which I don't
Yeah.
know if he'll be able to get to play. But
Yeah, that'll be
most
interesting.
most of those make sense, okay?
Yep.
But let's think about this for a second. Most of those make sense, but why do we have fan voting? Could it be coaches? Could it be GMs that make that vote? If you want to see the best of the best,
Isn't part of the voting GMs and coaches?
part of it.
Yeah,
But the fans get the first priority to it.
right.
Like I
And
think
the
GMs pick the
biggest
reserves, I believe.
oh, I
Yeah.
thought it was all weighted together. Oh, okay.
No.
They might have did they change the system in the last year or two to that then?
They changed too many rules.
They
I
change
can't
it all
keep
the
up
time.
with. Yeah.
But the one that I saw that's really interesting is the Cubs, or not the Cubs, the White Sox fans really trying to get Yoan Moncada as the catcher for the All-Star game. The
The
dude's batting like
0.48
point,
average, yeah.
I was gonna say like 0.74 or something like that. And like I get it, every team's meant to send one person to the All-Star game,
Yeah.
but Yoan Moncada should not be who the White Sox are sending.
So yeah, I don't know why the White Sox are gonna have Moncada wanting to. I get it, it's humor, but like
Hmm.
that's the real reason right there that you got to get
Yeah.
rid of fan
And
voting. Like
it's not the White Sox necessarily, it's the White Sox
it's
fans.
fans, yeah,
And what I've seen is they're trying to like reward him for like being there for so long.
yeah,
However, but like Garrett Crochet should be there instead, or Tommy Pham. Either one of them definitely should be there before. I would
yeah.
even say arguably um Luis Roberts over Yohan Moncada. Of course, Roberts hasn't played a ton this first half, so that's an uphill battle for him. But out of anybody, if you're going to send somebody, it needs to be one of those three, not Moncada.
So
Um,
let's go into the Tigers here. None of them. All right,
I
and
know I was really surprised about Riley
I'm
Green not being in,
Riley Green not being
or
in it with
Scooble.
his screwball either. No, I mean I'm sure they'll be get it as a reserve, but who even is the Tigers representative?
Well, it's
That
going to be Scooble.
is it?
Or wait, no, fans don't get to vote on starting pitchers or
Mm,
pitchers. Pitchers
okay.
are selected otherwise. That's why Scooble wasn't in. I forgot about that. Because I think
I,
they
I
used to be able to vote on pitchers.
I feel
Um,
like we will that will be our representative, but like Riley Green not even being in the top six of those names that I just saw on the thing after his performance is astronomical.
but you know what? It's again, as you said earlier, it's popularity, and the big thing is the Tigers aren't that good right now.
Right.
So it's like you are not a good team, you aren't a notable player, like you're not Mike Trout.
Yeah.
Um, you
Which
know,
even he's not really doing. I mean, he's
he was
injured
the
now,
number
but
9 guy, and yeah, he's injured, which is so sad because he started off the season as one of the best of his career, and I
yeah.
was really disappointed to see him go down. But yeah, I think it really comes down to how good's the team around you. The Blue Jays are only making this in because they have basically all of Canada voting. That's the only reason I think, because they're an okay team at best right now.
Yeah. No, 100%.
They're in the same frame as the Tigers, really.
Yeah.
Um, Only excuse they have is they're in one of the toughest divisions in baseball currently. Tigers are not. We
Yankees.
we don't
Yeah.
really have that excuse. Um, but yeah, it's just crazy because yeah, Riley has been playing out of his mind. I would wonder if Terry Carpenter hadn't gotten hurt, if he would
Ooh.
also be in that conversation because he
I
was
I
having
would
a
think Matt
really good year.
I would think Matt Vierling as well. Like every time
I
I
was a
go to
little
a game,
surprised too.
Vierling is 5 for 6 and hitting 2 home runs and walking
Yeah,
games off.
maybe you should go to more Tigers games, Evan.
You see, the problem is here in East Lansing, it is a solid 70-minute drive.
Oh, I
Uh,
know. And the
although,
Tigers tickets aren't the cheapest either.
well, you could get them for about
Like they
15,
aren't
20
bad.
in the
Yeah.
300 level for a good
Yeah.
view. You could get them for 15, 20 there. I mean, I'm one of those guys that like to sit down in the lower bowl.
Me
But
too.
lately I've been sufficing with the 300 level.
Which I will say with the 300 level seats, when I've gone and had those, another like something that I tend to do is I tend to walk around the stadium a little bit more. I'll hang
Yeah.
out on the wall in the outfield. I'll watch from the concourse or something, and just get different views while I'm there, and explore a little bit more.
What's your favorite on the topic? What's your favorite ballpark that you visited?
That I visited,
Yeah,
I have to clarify here that I've gone to a game at or just like seen, because I've seen the outside of my favorite ballpark, but I haven't seen a game there or
that
toured
you've
it because
been
it was
to.
closed. Okay, so not just being on the outside of it.
Correct.
Okay. Favorite one that I've seen a game at or toured, which are the same thing right now. I personally do like Comerica quite a bit. Dodger Stadium's really nice,
Been
and
to. Oh yeah, that's
I've
what
been
you
to
went
Dodger
to the.
Stadium twice.
You went. Did you go there during your WBC visit?
No, I went to Chase Field when I
Yeah.
went to the WBC. They didn't play at Dodger Stadium for the WBC. Um, I will say Chase Field also is pretty nice. Petco Park is nice.
Mm.
I've been there. Um, Personally, I would go between Chase Field or Petco Park. And Chase Field might be because of the atmosphere of the WBC, if I'm being completely honest. Petco Park's one of those parks that is just really nice to go to. Dodger Stadium definitely up there as well.
I that was the moment we talked about falling out of our chair.
Don't fall out of your
Bloopers.
chair, Evan.
Well, the one ballpark that I wish I'd been to would probably be. Oof. I love the skylines of San Francisco. I wish I could go to San Fran, but one I really
Oracle
like,
Park is my favorite park.
Oracle. Yeah, one one park I really like. I've only been to a few, surprisingly or not.
Mhm.
Been to Comerica zillion dozen times.
Yeah.
Um, I've been to Wrigley Field, I believe.
Ooh, I
Yeah.
want to go there. I
Gar
haven't had the
that's
chance.
so much fun. I honestly thought earlier in the season if I didn't get opening day tickets, that free opening day ticket that I
Hmm.
got, I was gonna go down to Chicago for Cubs Dodgers.
That would have
That
been a
was
good one.
that it was like $17 for the outfield. I
Really?
was like, what? Yeah, for opening weekend. I was like, what? Or not opening weekend, that next following week.
Right, but still.
That's exactly, yeah. Um, but woof, yeah, favorite ballpark, obviously. I mean, I like Comerica Park, but we got to bring back the whales. I talked about this on my podcast I do during the school year. Um, the whale ever since the whales, Jonathan, have been covered up,
We are terrible with the
they have
whales
been
covered.
terrible. We had a above 500 record with the whales. Every time we
Yep.
put a sponsorship ad on there
Yep.
for the NFL draft or for whatever else it might be,
Hmm.
we
Yeah,
go
because
into the draft.
we had those storms that came through last year and they ripped
Yeah,
down
the
the
Lunchables one.
yeah, was it Lunchables? I think it was Rocket Mortgage.
It was Lunchables. It was a
Oh, okay.
Lunchables one.
I
And
wasn't
then this
sure.
year's Cure Auto Insurance.
Okay,
Um,
I thought for sure it was Rocket Mortgage, but you probably are right. It was probably Lunchables. Um, but
but
whatever it was, it
r
ripped it down, and then after that we went on like a mad winning streak,
yeah,
and we finished out the season. I want to say like 600 ball or something like that, six or
yeah.
700 ball, and it was just crazy. And then we started this season really hot. They covered it up mid game, and then we went on a massive losing streak, and then we've just been terrible since.
But you
We
know
need
who
to
mans that
uncover the
Comerica
whales.
Park outfield? Riley Green.
Oh, yes, he does. Yes, he does. Yep. Yep. Him and Vierling. Yep.
That outfield, honestly, I don't understand. Someone was talking to me about this at the game the other day that I was at, which I'll tell you about in a second. But
Mhm.
the they were like AJ switches his lineup so many times. There's
Well,
one
yeah.
day so many times. What do you mean? Well, yeah. Like you say that like
Well, even if you look at teams, there was a graphic from last year that I saw right before the beginning of this season that
yeah,
said the most common lineup for each team. Like they took all of the lineups and they made the most common one. And the top team, I'm not sure if it was the Dodgers or Phillies. I think
Mm.
only used it 18 times total during the year. Like that most common lineup. Most teams actually swap quite a bit. It's
And
just
honestly,
normally
that's
a few
analytical.
spell sheet. Exactly. If somebody's batting better right now, you'll or like against certain pitchers, you'll bump them around.
Yeah.
But I think especially with the Tigers right now, with how bad we've been struggling on offense, Hinch is trying to, bump those guys around and try to, get a spark going in this offense finally. Real quick before we go, I'm going to ask you this question. I've already answered this question in another episode, but
Okay.
we like to end on a question: is what general manager and what or president of baseball ops and what manager would you like to have dinner with individually?
Do I have to pick one from each of those categories?
I did a president of baseball ops and
Okay, so you can pick one.
slash general manager, and I also did manager because I said Jim Leland, Dusty Baker, or AJ Hinch would be some
You
guys that I
know,
would like.
I
And then
did
for
listen.
the baseball operations, you have Scott Harris, Chime Bloom, and um, who's the last guy now? He was with the Mets.
A manager I
He
would
used to be
love
with the
to
Mets.
have. Does it have to be a current manager?
No, I did Jim Leland and Dusty
Okay,
Baker.
I got you. All right, so the manager I would actually love to hear the mind of Sparky Anderson. Um, Obviously we can't do that now. But Sparky Anderson, always insightful. Another one that I would love to share. I would share that AJ Hinch one.
Mhm.
If I listened to the podcast that they actually started this year with the Tigers organization, it's called Have a Seat with Jason
Yeah.
Benetti and Dan Dickerson. In their first episode, they did AJ Hinch. And he talked about how he decides pitching matchups, how he talks about how he really goes to the mound when it's not just a stroll to the mound and say, hand me the
Mhm.
ball. He talked about that situation a little bit, and it was really interesting to me because you have all these different things that come into play, whether it's analytics, how the player's feeling, etc. But he was really breaking it down about how he sets his lineup every day. He looks at it a few days in advance, and then he'll say, okay, well, this is what I got from my analytics department. This is what I got from this department. This is how this team is doing. This is how this side is doing. This is how this person's doing lefty. This is how, but he always mentions in that podcast multiple times, he said, even if a player is on the bench, do not feel like your day is off. You
Mhm.
always want to have the bat ready. Like example, Andy Ibanez is one
Mhm.
that we see come off the bat or off the
Off
bench
the bench a
uh,
lot.
so a
Yep.
lot this year. That would be interesting. I'd also be interested in an announcer actually that would I would love to sit down with, or I wish I could have sat down with Vince Scully.
Ben Scully.
Um,
Yep.
I was fortunate enough to get insight from Dan Dickerson this past semester in a class. Um, but yeah, Vince Scully is one of the names that you hear. Even the guy I mentioned earlier from the Giants, Dave Fleming.
Mhm.
Um, does it the Giants announcing crew in general, the radio booth. I listen to a lot of that on MLB TV
Yep.
or all that fun stuff. But they do a phenomenal job of delivering the game. They do a thing called 3-3-3. So they alternate who there's one voice and he does play by play in color for 3 innings. Other guy does it for 3 innings, and another guy does it.
Oh,
They
interesting.
alternate back for 3 innings. And it's really cool because you don't really notice, yes, you notice a change in their voice, like who's
And the
talking,
pitch and everything.
but
Yeah.
you don't notice the storytelling changing. And it's a really cool philosophy because when especially when you're driving, you hear you're focused. You have a truck on one side of the road, you have a car,
Mhm.
and you have a bridge on the other side of the road. Your job as a radio announcer is to paint the picture, but also be that secondary noise. You're not just gonna be like, I hate the radio broadcast that the color commentary talks over the play-by-play. That's golden rule number
Yep.
one, okay? But the play-by-play that will be like, analyzing how the birds are flying, winds are flying. I can't see that as a viewer, but it also gives me attention to say, "Hey, Jonathan, this is I'm in the middle of driving on I-27.
Hmm.
I have a truck near me. Oh, we just hit a home run. Who was it? Tell me, Dan." Dan will tell me the entire like how that situation happens,
The sequence, yeah.
how he inflects his voice is really interesting to me. I used to love listening to, I know this kind of wasn't directly your question, but I used to love listening to Mario Mbemba when he was
Hmm.
with the Tigers, because he would have that inflection too, where you could be doing something, you could be doing the dishes, you could be doing whatever, and all of a sudden Mario, example when JD Martinez pinch hit off Chris Sale,
Yeah.
that inflection, you hear the crowd noise. So those are different things. For those, I'm a production person as well. I do some production work. So whenever time I hear audio work, it really draws my ears. I hate going to movies as well because of that nature. I'm always
Hmm.
focused on the wrong things. But the nature of that, honestly, it brings you connection, because all the time, the one thing that I'll leave you with here, Jonathan, the misconception that I hear all the time from people is when they're watching a game is, oh, this guy's being a homer, or this guy is over analyzing, and I'm like, what are you meant to do? It's 49-0, or
Yeah.
it's 30-11, and these announcers are telling you the story of the game. It's like Michigan State basketball example, but
Hmm.
there's points where you struggle throughout the year.
Yep.
Sometimes they have to mention that. They're not just going to
Yep.
say, well, other things, or even Dan does a good job of mentioning it a little bit. But all the announcers are not, yes, they work for their individual Bally or Yes Network, whatever it is.
Yep.
Um, but at the end of the day, every game is a new game.
Right.
And there's sometimes where, for example, the Mets announcers have uh, kind of been moaning and groaning, or the White Sox announcers have been moaning and groaning. What do you expect? It's the 162 game season.
Right.
But at the end of the day, um, you're showing that emotion as well.
Hmm.
Um, Maybe not from the fan perspective, but they are passionate about their teams they cover too.
Hmm. Right. And I think you kind of have to be passionate about your team that you cover too. And I'm also really glad that you mentioned that you work in production, because that kind of, shows why you would pick somebody who's an announcer. Um,
Yeah, like a lot of the times, yes, you can go, if you told me to pick a Tiger that I wanted to sit down with, I might even pick an old school guy.
Mhm.
I might pick Rick Porcello.
Ooh, Rick
Um,
Porcello would be fun.
and I'll tell you what, because he went through a bunch of different things. If you remember, he had one season where he struggled, and then he had like this season where he got 18, 19 wins,
Yep.
20 something wins. Then he got traded to Boston. And
And
then
then he won the Cy
he
Young there
struggled. Well,
after
he won a
struggling.
Cy
Yes.
Young, and then but struggled again. So
Yeah.
I'd really love to hear his story a little bit.
Mhm.
Another player I would do is Andrew Chafin. All the time you see on his shirts, he see failed starter or whatever he
Mhm.
wears. He's a character.
Yeah. And
I
he's
don't
been
know him
traded
personally.
around quite a bit too.
He's
So
like
it'd
the
be
Curtis
interesting to ask
Grandison
them.
of today's age. He's been traded a billion times. I think this is his second. Is this his second time on the Tigers?
It's his second stint on the
Yeah.
Tigers and second time in 3 years,
Yeah.
because he was with
I,
Arizona last year and then came back here.
I'd be interested to hear from him about his story, about not just the baseball side, his
Hmm.
interest.
Hmm.
There's a bunch of different guys. I know I picked three different answers there, but you can
Yeah.
splice between whatever.
Yeah, you're all good. And I liked you bringing up the announcers thing. I think Vin Scully would be a really interesting one to talk with. I think Ernie Harwell.
Yeah, Ernie's. I forgot.
Like,
I don't know why I didn't mention that.
I was kind of waiting for you to, and I was like, oh, maybe, like that's kind of like the low-hanging fruit. Yeah, I think that would be great, especially just with us being Detroit fans.
Yeah.
That was the voice of the Tigers for so long.
But no, yes, Ernie was a very influential person
Hmm.
to uh the Mage game, and even like you listen to his archives now, and
Mhm.
it's kind of like the Vin Scully type of thing. And
It
he
is, or
calls
like
games.
Harry Carey
Yeah.
also. Like all those, you have a few guys who are just legendary announcers.
Just don't bring Harry Canary into play. Uh, and for those that I'm talking about, a mascot thing that is
Yeah,
creepy as one could be,
superstars.
uh, but yeah, that was fun.
Yeah. So on that note, I think we'll wrap this up. So thank you so much for coming on this week, Evan.
Thank you for having
Um,
me.
yeah, of course. So if you guys liked Evan here, make sure to like the video so we know to bring him back in the future. Make sure always to hit the subscribe button and watch our previous podcast and videos, and we will see you next week.